A hidden connection. The surprising truth behind the child's adoption. The shocking decision. Lucy sat quietly in the living room of their home, gazing out of the window. The soft golden light of the late afternoon poured through the curtains, casting a warm glow on the room. The house, filled with the echoes of memories and unspoken dreams, seemed emptier than usual. She held a letter in her hands, crumpled slightly from the grip of her trembling fingers. It was the letter from the adoption agency, the letter that changed everything. For years, Lucy had dreamed of becoming a mother. The thought of cradling a child, of watching them grow and learn, was a vision that had lived in her heart since she could remember, but the reality was far different. Despite countless medical procedures, tests, and consultations, Lucy had come to terms with the fact that having a biological child was not in the cards for her. The infertility diagnosis had crushed her spirit, but over time she had found ways to accept it. Yet there was always a lingering ache, a hole in her heart where the dream of motherhood should have been. Her husband Daniel had been a rock through it all. He had stood by her during the difficult medical appointments, comforting her when hope seemed too far out of reach. He had always reassured her that it didn't matter. "We'll figure it out together," he would say, his deep voice full of unwavering love and support. His words were always a balm to her weary soul. But as the years passed, Lucy couldn't help but feel the quiet distance that had begun to grow between them. The dream of children, once a shared vision, had faded into the background, and the closeness they once had began to feel like a distant memory. And then one day it happened. It was a regular Tuesday evening when Lucy's decision was made. She had always known deep down that adoption was the answer. She had even mentioned it to Daniel a few times, but the timing had never felt right. It wasn't just about adopting any child, it was about giving someone a chance at the life they deserved. Lucy had read through countless profiles of children in need of a family, but it was one profile in particular that had captured her heart. Emily. The little girl's bright blue eyes in the photo reminded Lucy of a reflection she'd seen in the mirror long ago. Innocent, hopeful, and full of promise. Emily had been in the foster system for most of her life, moving from one family to the next. She had never known what it felt like to have a real home, to have a family to call her own. The thought of her so alone and so young haunted Lucy. That evening, after much contemplation, Lucy filled out the adoption application. She knew she was taking a huge step, one that would forever change her life. And Daniel's life too. She didn't tell him immediately. She needed to be sure of her decision first. The next morning the confirmation came. The agency had accepted her application and the process would begin. But the hardest part, she realized, was yet to come. Telling Daniel. Later that night, as they sat down to dinner, Lucy could feel the weight of the secret in her chest. She could hear the soft clink of silverware against plates, the mundane chatter of daily life, but inside her heart was racing. Daniel was in a good mood as usual, cracking jokes and making her laugh. But Lucy could see the exhaustion behind his smile. She knew the stress of his work was taking its toll on him. His days were long and the pressure of providing for both of them seemed to hang over him constantly. "Dan, can we talk?" she said, her voice softer than usual. He stopped mid-bite, his fork pausing in mid-air. "Of course, love. What's on your mind?" "I've made a decision," Lucy began, taking a deep breath. "A decision about us, about our family." Daniel's eyebrows furrowed slightly, a concerned look crossing his face. "What do you mean?" Lucy hesitated, feeling a lump form in her throat. She hadn't expected this moment to be so difficult. "I want to adopt a child." "Daniel, I know we've talked about it before, but I feel like now is the time." Daniel placed his fork down gently, his eyes fixed on her. "Adopt, you mean now?" He paused clearly, surprised by her sudden declaration. "I thought we agreed we would take it slow, see how things go after the IVF treatments." "I know," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. "But I've been thinking about it, and I just can't ignore it anymore. I want to be a mother, Dan. I want to give a child someone who needs us. A real family. I've made up my mind." Daniel was silent for a moment, as if the weight of her words was sinking in. He opened his mouth to speak but then closed it, looking at her with a mixture of shock and confusion. "I didn't expect you to feel this way so suddenly," he said softly. "I'm not saying I'm against it, but are we ready for this? I mean, with everything going on with my job, the house, everything, it's a lot." "I know it's a lot," Lucy replied, her voice steady now. "But I've been thinking about it for so long I can't keep waiting for the right moment. I want to give Emily a chance at a better life, just like we always dreamed of having a family." Daniel leaned back in his chair, staring at her with a look of deep contemplation. His mind raced, and he could feel the weight of her decision pressing on his chest. They had always talked about having children, but it had never been easy. The pain of infertility had strained their relationship, even though neither of them spoke about it directly. Lucy's desire to become a mother had been something he had always understood, but now seeing her so determined, he couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. "I don't know, Lucy," he said finally, his voice quiet. "It's a big step, and it's not just about us anymore. We're talking about someone else's life." "I know," she said, standing up and walking over to him. "But I believe it's the right thing to do." Daniel looked up at her, his expression softened by her sincerity. "You really believe that?" Lucy nodded. "I do." The next few days passed in a blur. Lucy had begun the adoption process in earnest, filling out forms and attending interviews, all while maintaining the delicate balance of normal life. She tried her best to hide the excitement that bubbled within her, but every moment was a reminder that a new chapter was beginning. She had chosen to keep it a secret from Daniel until everything was finalized, until they were certain that Emily was theirs. Then one afternoon the call came. The adoption was approved, and they were ready to bring Emily into their home. Lucy's heart raced as she picked up the phone, a mix of excitement and fear coursing through her. She quickly dialed Daniel's number, but her hands were shaking too much to hold the phone steady. "Hello, Dan. I need to tell you something," she said, her voice trembling with anticipation. "What is it, babe? I've made it official. Emily's going to be our daughter." There was a long pause on the other end of the line before Daniel's voice came through thick with emotion. "Our daughter. You've actually done it." Lucy smiled through her tears. "Yes, I've done it. Dan, I've chosen her. She's going to be part of our family." Daniel let out a long breath, his voice soft and filled with wonder. "I don't know what to say. I'm shocked, but I'm happy. Let's do this." And so in that moment, everything changed. Lucy had made the decision to bring a new life into their home, and in doing so, she had set the stage for a journey that neither of them could have foreseen. They were about to welcome a child into their lives, a child who would bring with her more than just love. She would bring with her a connection that neither of them could have ever imagined. A connection that would change everything. The hidden connection. Daniel sat in the quiet of the evening, the soft hum of the refrigerator, the only sound in the otherwise still house. He had just returned from work, the familiar weight of his briefcase in his hand. But the tension in his chest felt heavier than usual. Since the adoption of Emily, something had been gnawing at him, something he couldn't quite put his finger on. It wasn't that he didn't love her? No, that wasn't it at all. He had immediately fallen for the bright-eyed innocent child who had entered their home with nothing but hope and a small suitcase. He had seen how she and Lucy bonded instantly, how the little girl brought so much joy into their lives. But there was something strange, a nagging feeling, a whisper at the back of his mind, a sense of familiarity that seemed to surround Emily, something he couldn't explain. It wasn't just her bright smile or the way she looked at him. Sometimes it was deeper than that. It was in her mannerisms, the way she tilted her head when she asked a question, or the way her eyes would sometimes widen in curiosity, almost as though she had seen him before. It was as though she recognized him, as though she had known him her entire life. Daniel had been trying to ignore it, trying to focus on being a good father to the little girl who had suddenly become the center of their world. But the more time he spent with Emily, the more certain he became that there was something more to this connection. He couldn't shake the feeling that he knew her from somewhere. One evening after a long day at the office, Daniel walked into the living room where Lucy was sitting with Emily on the couch watching TV. Emily, who was nestled under a blanket, glanced up and smiled as he entered the room. "Hey, Daddy," she said sweetly, her voice soft and comforting. He smiled back, his heart swelling with affection. "Hey, Pumpkin," he replied, taking a seat beside her. The warm smell of fresh-baked cookies filled the room, and he couldn't help but feel at peace in this moment. Yet the strange feeling that had been creeping in remained. "How was work?" Lucy asked, her voice gentle as she stroked Emily's hair. "Long," he said with a sigh, rubbing his neck. "You know the usual. How was the day here?" "Wonderful," Lucy said with a smile. "Emily helped me bake cookies. She's quite the little chef already." Emily beamed proudly, her cheeks flushed with excitement. "And we played board games, Daddy. I won 3 times in a row." Daniel chuckled, feeling his heart soften at her enthusiasm. "You must be some kind of board game wizard then," he teased, ruffling her hair. As Emily giggled, Daniel's gaze shifted back to her face. The more he looked at her, the more he noticed something familiar in the way she smiled, something about the way her eyes sparkled, a reflection of something in his past. It was a passing thought at first, but it lingered. He tried to brush it off, but the unease continued to grow. Later that night, when Lucy had put Emily to bed, Daniel found himself alone in the quiet of the living room, staring at the photo of their family on the wall. The peaceful image of him, Lucy and Emily, so happy and complete, seemed to mock him. He grabbed his phone and began scrolling through old photographs. He had done this before, but tonight it felt different. He was searching for something, though he wasn't sure what. His thumb moved slowly across the screen as he looked at pictures from his past photos of his childhood, his family, his friends. Then suddenly he froze. One picture in particular caught his eye. It was an old photograph taken at a family reunion years ago. There in the background, standing by the old oak tree, was a woman. She was laughing, her face filled with joy, and her eyes sparkled with the same brightness he had seen in Emily's. Daniel's heart skipped a beat. The woman in the picture. It was someone he had once known a long time ago. He hadn't thought about her in years, but now seeing her face again, after all this time, the memories rushed back. Her name was Amelia. Amelia had been a part of his life for a brief period during his late 20s, just before he met Lucy. They had a whirlwind romance, one filled with passion and excitement, but ultimately it fizzled out. Daniel remembered her as a beautiful, independent woman full of life and ambition, but they had grown apart when their different paths in life became too obvious to ignore. She had moved on, and so had he, eventually finding Lucy, the love of his life. But now looking at the photograph of Amelia, and then at Emily, Daniel's mind raced. Could Emily be Amelia's daughter? His hand shook as he zoomed in on the photograph, his eyes narrowing on Amelia's face. The resemblance was undeniable. The same green eyes, the same wide smile. And there was something about the way Emily looked at him, something that felt like recognition, a strange familiarity he couldn't explain. He had never known Amelia had a child. Had she kept Emily a secret all these years? But if that were true, why hadn't she told him? Why hadn't he known? The questions kept swirling in his mind as he tried to make sense of the connection. He thought back to the times when Emily would look at him almost as if she knew him. Was it possible that she recognized him from the past? Had Amelia kept something hidden from him all this time? Something that was now surfacing in the most unexpected of ways. The weight of the discovery settled heavily on Daniel's chest. He needed answers. He needed to find out who Emily really was and how she was connected to him. And most importantly, he needed to find out if the woman in the photograph, Amelia, had something to do with the girl now living in his home. The next morning, after a restless night of pacing and thinking, Daniel made a decision. He would confront Lucy. He had to know the truth. But as he prepared to speak to her, he couldn't shake the feeling that he might be opening a door to a truth he wasn't prepared for. He was no longer sure of anything. The life he thought he knew was about to unravel, and all because of a little girl who reminded him of a woman he had long since forgotten. The past resurfaces. The morning sun had barely broken over the horizon when Daniel found himself pacing nervously in his office. The discovery he had made the night before, the possibility that Emily might be connected to his past in ways he couldn't understand, haunted him relentlessly. The lingering feeling that something was off with Emily's resemblance to the woman in his photograph left him with more questions than answers. But he knew there was only one way to move forward. He needed to know the truth, and the only way to get the answers he sought was to confront the past that had remained buried for so long. After a restless night filled with fragmented memories and unsettling thoughts, Daniel decided to track down the woman who had haunted his memories, Amelia. He had not seen her in years, but her face now staring back at him from the photo refused to leave his mind. Was she somehow connected to Emily? Was Emily her daughter, or was there something else at play here? As he sat at his desk, staring blankly at the computer screen, his phone buzzed with an incoming message. He hadn't even noticed that he had received a text from his old friend Ryan, a name that instantly brought a smile to his face. Ryan had been his college roommate, and over the years their friendship had endured even through the toughest of times. They had shared everything: dreams, fears, and even the heartbreaks that life inevitably brought. Daniel opened the message from Ryan, his heart skipping a beat when he read the words, "Hey, Daniel, are you free later today? I think you should meet someone. Trust me, you won't believe who I bumped into." It was strange to receive such a message. He hadn't spoken to Ryan in months. Curiosity piqued. Daniel replied quickly, "What's going on? Who did you run into?" Ryan's response was almost immediate. "You'll see. I'll meet you at the cafe in an hour. You need to hear this." An hour later, Daniel found himself standing in front of the same cafe where he and Ryan had spent countless hours talking about life. The place hadn't changed much. It still had the same familiar smell of freshly brewed coffee and the comforting hum of quiet conversations. Daniel stepped inside, looking around for his friend. As he walked towards the back corner of the cafe, Daniel spotted Ryan waving at him with a grin on his face. But what caught his attention more than anything was the woman sitting next to him. She had striking features, long dark hair, and a face that seemed oddly familiar. "Daniel over here," Ryan called out, motioning for him to join them. As Daniel approached, his heart sank. He recognized her instantly. It was Amelia. His mind raced as he took a seat, his hands suddenly clammy. Amelia was sitting there, looking just as she had the last time he saw her, only older, with a subtle weight of time marking her face. Her eyes, still sharp and clear, locked onto his with an intensity that made his heart race. "Amelia," Daniel said, his voice barely above a whisper, as though speaking her name out loud would shatter the fragile reality he had built in his mind. I didn't expect this." Amelia gave him a soft smile, though her eyes held a deep, knowing sadness. "I didn't expect to see you again either, Daniel," she said, her voice calm but tinged with emotion. "But it seems like fate has a funny way of bringing people together when they least expect it." Ryan, sensing the tension between them, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "I didn't mean to throw you into something heavy," he said, glancing back and forth between them. "But Daniel, you need to listen to what Amelia has to say." Daniel turned his attention back to Amelia, his mind swirling with 1,000 questions. She was the key to everything, the connection between Emily and the family he thought he knew. He needed answers, and he needed them now. "Amelia, what's going on?" he asked, his voice betraying the urgency he felt. "Why are you here? What's this all about?" Amelia took a deep breath, her fingers clasping tightly around her coffee cup. "Daniel," she began, her voice steady but filled with an undeniable pain. "There's something I never told you about the time we spent together, something I've kept hidden all these years." Daniel leaned forward, his curiosity piqued, but a sense of unease growing within him. What was she going to say? "You remember how we ended things, don't you?" Amelia asked, her gaze not leaving his. "You were always the ambitious one, the one who was focused on your career and your future. And me? Well, I was lost. I was in a bad place, and we both knew it wasn't working between us." Daniel nodded slowly. He remembered their breakup all too well. It had been painful, but he had moved on. He had to. He couldn't let the past hold him back. But there's more to it than that, Daniel. Amelia continued, her voice growing softer. What I didn't tell you is that I was pregnant. I had your child. Daniel froze. The words hit him like a freight train, knocking the air from his lungs. His mind scrambled to comprehend what she was saying. A child? His child? Amelia seemed to sense the shock in his expression and quickly added, I didn't know what to do. I didn't think I could give the baby the life it deserved. I was struggling, Daniel. I was alone and I was scared. So I made a decision, one I regret every single day. Daniel's heart pounded in his chest as he fought to absorb the gravity of her words. You had a child. Why didn't you tell me? He asked, his voice hoarse, full of emotion. Amelia's gaze dropped to the table, her fingers tightening around her coffee cup. I wasn't sure if you even cared. You were already planning your future and I was a mess. I thought it would be better for both of us if I kept it a secret. I couldn't bring another life into that chaos. But I should have told you, Daniel. I should have let you know. A silence fell between them, the weight of her confession pressing down on Daniel. His thoughts spun in a whirlwind of disbelief and confusion. So, Emily... Daniel's voice cracked as he said her name. Is she our daughter? Amelia nodded, her eyes filled with regret and sorrow. Yes, Emily is your daughter, Daniel. Daniel's breath caught in his throat as the truth slammed into him like a tidal wave. The girl he had been raising, the girl he had come to love as his own, she was his daughter, his own flesh and blood. But there was more to it, more than he could possibly understand. Amelia's eyes darkened as she spoke again. Daniel, she said, her voice filled with a mix of sorrow and guilt. There's something else you need to know. I didn't just leave her in an orphanage because I couldn't care for her. There's more to her story, more than you're ready to hear. But if you really want to understand everything, you need to listen. The world seemed to tilt beneath him as Daniel tried to process it all. Emily, his daughter, was standing in his home right under his nose without him ever knowing the truth. And now the past he thought he had left behind was coming back to haunt him with a story far more complicated than he could have imagined. As the pieces of his life began to crumble around him, Daniel knew one thing for certain: he had to find the truth. For Emily's sake, for his sake, and for the sake of the family, he was only beginning to understand. Secrets revealed. The weight of the truth hung heavy in the air as Daniel sat in the quiet of his home, staring at the photograph of Emily on the table in front of him. He could hardly reconcile the joyful, innocent face in the photo with the tumult of emotions that surged within him. His daughter, the daughter he had unknowingly raised for the past several months. But there was more, much more that Daniel didn't know. The truth about Emily's past and the family secrets that had been buried for so long were slowly beginning to unravel, and with each new revelation, Daniel's world seemed to shift beneath him. Lucy sat next to him, her gaze fixed on the photograph of Emily. Her heart ached for their daughter, for the life she had yet to truly experience. But she also understood the magnitude of the situation. They had both been living in a lie. How could they move forward from this? How could they keep Emily in their lives when the very foundation of her existence seemed so uncertain? After Amelia's bombshell revelation, Daniel had tried to digest everything in private. But the more he thought about it, the more questions he had. How had Emily ended up in an orphanage? Why hadn't Amelia been there to raise her? Why had she made the decision to abandon her daughter? And why, after all these years, had she suddenly come into their lives? His thoughts were interrupted by the ringing of the doorbell. Lucy stood up quickly, her hands trembling as she adjusted her dress. Daniel gave her a reassuring smile, though he too felt the knot in his stomach tighten. "I'll get it," Daniel said, rising from the couch and heading towards the door. When he opened it, his breath caught. There, standing before him, was Amelia. Again. Amelia. Daniel said, his voice a mixture of surprise and suspicion. "What are you doing here?" Amelia's eyes darted to the floor and she took a step forward, holding something tightly in her hands. "I need to talk to both of you," she said softly, her voice filled with guilt. "It's about Emily. There's something else you need to know." Lucy, hearing the conversation, joined Daniel at the door, her heart racing in anticipation. She too had questions that needed answers. Amelia stepped inside her gaze, avoiding theirs as she took a seat on the couch. She looked tired, as though the weight of the past few days had worn her down. With a deep breath, she began. "Daniel, Lucy, what I'm about to tell you, it's not easy," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "Emily, she isn't just any orphan. She's not just a child that I gave up. She's tied to something much bigger than either of you could have imagined." Daniel's heart thudded painfully in his chest. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "What aren't you telling us?" Amelia hesitated for a moment, clearly struggling with the weight of her words. But then she looked up at them, her eyes full of regret. "Emily isn't just my daughter," she began. "She's your niece, Daniel." The words hit Daniel like a punch to the stomach. "What?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. Lucy took a step back, her mind racing. "Niece? But that doesn't make sense?" Amelia nodded slowly. "Yes, Emily is the daughter of my sister Claire. Claire was the one who gave birth to her, not me. I took Emily in because my sister, she couldn't take care of her. Claire struggled with addiction, and she wasn't fit to raise a child. I tried to help her, but it was too much. Emily was taken from her, and I was the one who ended up adopting her. But what you don't know, Daniel, is that Emily's birth mother. Claire is your sister." Daniel's entire world tilted at that moment. His sister. His long-lost sister. He had thought Claire was gone from his life forever. His family had never spoken about her, and over time he had forgotten about the past. His father had spoken little about Claire, and the memories of her were faded, blurred by the years. But hearing Amelia's words now, he realized there was so much more to his family than he had ever known. "I never knew. I had a sister," Daniel said, his voice cracking with emotion. He was struggling to make sense of the revelation, his mind overwhelmed with the implications. How could this be? Why didn't anyone tell me about this? Amelia looked at him, her eyes filled with sadness. "I was young when it all happened." "Daniel, Claire. She never wanted you to know about Emily. She was ashamed of what happened. She couldn't bear the thought of you knowing that she had a child, especially after everything she went through, and after her passing. I tried to keep it a secret for her." Daniel felt like the ground had been pulled out from beneath him. His sister, someone he thought had simply disappeared from his life, had been there all along, and her daughter Emily had been living just beneath his nose, growing up without him knowing. Lucy, too, was struggling to comprehend what Amelia had just shared. "So what does this mean for us?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What does it mean for Emily?" Amelia sighed deeply. "It means Emily has a family. Daniel, a family that she didn't know about, and it means you're more connected to her than you realize. You're her uncle, Daniel, and I'm not sure if I can continue raising her the way I have. It's too complicated." Daniel ran a hand through his hair, frustration and confusion swirling in his mind. He had spent so long wondering about Emily's background, and now it seemed like the truth was more complicated than he had ever imagined. "But what about Weston?" Lucy asked, her voice uncertain. "What about the life we've built with Emily?" Amelia hesitated before answering. "Weston? He never knew about Emily's connection to the family either. I've kept this secret for so long. But now you both need to decide what you're going to do. Emily deserves to know who she is. She deserves the truth." As the room fell silent, Daniel and Lucy exchanged glances. The weight of the situation hung heavily in the air. The secrets of the past had resurfaced, and now they would have to face the consequences. Daniel's mind was racing. He was learning things about his family that he never knew, and it felt as if everything he thought he knew about his life was being torn apart. The connection between Emily and his family was undeniable, but what did it mean for the future? Could he, Lucy and Emily, really form the kind of family he had always dreamed of? As the day wore on, Daniel realized that the decisions ahead would not be easy. The past had come back to haunt him, and now he had to decide how to move forward, whether he would embrace this unexpected family connection or let the past remain buried. One thing was certain, though: his life and Emily's would never be the same again. A father's dilemma. The weight of his thoughts pressed heavily on Daniel's chest as he sat alone in the quiet of his study. His fingers brushed the edge of the desk where a picture frame sat. An image of him and Lucy, both beaming with happiness, surrounded by their dreams of a perfect life. But now the dream seemed distant, fractured by the unexpected truth that had come to light. Emily, the little girl they had opened their home and hearts to, was not just an orphan. She wasn't just the child they had tried to help heal with love. She was family, a part of him, a part of Lucy. And yet the connection went deeper than just being a niece. The girl who had unknowingly brought them both closer to their pasts had also unknowingly become a bridge between two worlds, the family Daniel never knew, and the life he had built with Lucy. But now Daniel faced the most agonizing decision of his life. Could he accept Emily as his daughter despite the web of secrets and betrayals tied to her? And if he did, what would that mean for the future of his marriage with Lucy? His eyes fell to the empty chair across from him, imagining Lucy sitting there, her eyes filled with the same questions that swirled in his mind. They had always dreamed of having children, but their journey had been clouded by infertility, and now in a way they hadn't anticipated that dream had been realized in the form of Emily. But it wasn't a straightforward path. The tangled web of her past, her biological mother, the long-lost connections, the painful truth of how she came to be with them made everything feel uncertain. Daniel thought back to the countless hours they had spent in this house discussing their hopes, their plans, their dreams of a future together. He had always been the one who provided, who assured Lucy that everything would be fine, that they could overcome any obstacle. But now he didn't have the answers. He didn't have the strength to reassure her. All he had were questions. What did it mean to be a father? Was it the blood running through your veins? Or was it the love and protection you gave unconditionally? Could he in good conscience accept Emily as his daughter, when his heart was still tangled in confusion? Daniel stood up from his desk, pacing back and forth, trying to gather his thoughts. The question wasn't just about Emily, it was about everything about the life he had built, the love he had for Lucy, and the unexpected truth that had shaken everything. What did it mean for his relationship with Lucy, and where did Emily fit into this picture? His thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. "Come in!" He called, his voice tight with the strain of his inner conflict. Lucy entered, her presence filling the room with a quiet warmth. She stood by the door, watching him for a moment, her eyes soft with concern. "I thought you might be here," she said gently. "I brought you some tea. You look like you could use it." Daniel smiled weakly, but the warmth in her voice only seemed to intensify the storm brewing inside him. Lucy had always been the steady one, the one who held things together when they seemed to fall apart. But now she was caught in the same web of uncertainty that he was. "I don't know what to do, Lucy," he admitted, his voice cracking slightly. "Everything's changed, Emily. She's a part of me, I can feel it. But can I just accept her like that? After everything. After all these secrets." Lucy took a deep breath and walked over to him, placing the cup of tea on the table before sitting down beside him. Her hand found his, her fingers intertwining with his in a gesture of support. "I know this is hard," she said softly, "but remember, she's not a stranger to us. She's been in our lives for months now. Daniel, she's already become part of our family, maybe not the family we thought we'd have, but a family nonetheless." Daniel shook his head. "I thought we had it all figured out, Lucy. We'd build a life together, just the two of us. But now everything's complicated, Emily. She's not just a girl we adopted. She's tied to something much bigger, something from the past that I didn't even know existed. And now I have to ask myself, what does it mean to be a father? Can I just step in and be her dad? I don't even know who I am anymore." Lucy squeezed his hand, her voice filled with empathy. "You're still the same man, Daniel. The man who loved me when we had nothing. The man who has always tried to do what's right. And now you're the same man who has to figure out how to be a father to a little girl who needs you. It's not going to be easy, but you're not alone. We'll figure this out together." Daniel leaned back in his chair, feeling the weight of her words settle on him. The uncertainty still gripped his heart, but Lucy's support was the anchor he needed. He couldn't change the past, he couldn't undo what had been done, but he could make a choice. A choice to be there for Emily, to be the father she needed, no matter what the past had looked like. He looked at her, his eyes filled with gratitude. "I don't know if I'm ready, Lucy. I'm so scared of messing up." Lucy smiled softly, brushing a stray lock of hair from his forehead. "You're not alone in this. We'll figure it out together." Daniel took a deep breath, trying to calm the whirlwind inside him. He knew this wasn't just about Emily. This was about him, about Lucy, about the kind of family they wanted to be, and the road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. He couldn't keep running from the truth. He had to face it. Later that night, as Daniel lay in bed next to Lucy, he found himself thinking about the future Emily was already a part of their lives. But now it was time to decide if he could truly open his heart to her, to embrace the family that fate had brought him, no matter how complicated it might be. And as the soft sounds of the night surrounded them, Daniel made a silent promise to himself and to Lucy. Whatever the future held, he would be there every step of the way, for them, for Emily, for the family they had yet to become, the truth. The days that followed were a blur of emotions for Daniel. Consumed by the internal conflict of his duty toward Emily and the fears about her past, he found it difficult to focus on the positives. It felt as though every step forward was met with the weight of unanswered questions. Then, on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, everything changed. Daniel had just returned home from a taxing day at work, his mind still overwhelmed with thoughts of Emily's future, when an unexpected knock on the door shattered the stillness of the house. Standing before him was a man he didn't recognize. Tall, with sharp features and an unsettling presence. The man's eyes seemed oddly familiar, sending a strange shiver down Daniel's spine. "Are you Daniel Green?" the man asked, his voice low but unmistakably clear. Daniel's heart skipped a beat. "Yes, I am. Who are you?" The stranger stepped forward, his gaze fixed on Daniel with intensity. "My name is Robert Hughes. We need to talk about something. Something involving your family." Daniel's confusion deepened. He had never heard of Robert Hughes before, but there was something in the man's demeanor, a sense of familiarity that made Daniel feel this conversation was inevitable, as if it had been coming for a long time. "I don't know you," Daniel replied, stepping back slightly. "What is this about?" Robert took a deep breath, almost as if bracing himself. "I'm sure you don't remember me. After all, you were just a child back then. But I remember you, Daniel. I remember you very well, and it's time you heard the truth." Daniel felt a cold shiver run down his spine. The truth about what Robert's expression softened, but there was something heavy in his eyes. He glanced over his shoulder, as though ensuring no one was listening before speaking again. "I knew your mother quite well," Robert said, his voice tinged with sadness. "And I knew your family's secrets. I know what you've been told, but there's more to the story. Much more. Your family's past isn't what you think it is." Daniel's mind raced. His family had always been the rock upon which he built his life. He had never questioned them, never doubted the foundation they provided. But now this stranger, Robert Hughes, was telling him that everything he thought he knew about his family was a lie. "What are you talking about?" Daniel demanded, his voice rising. "Are you saying my family lied to me? What are you trying to say?" Robert took a step closer, his voice becoming more urgent. "I'm saying that the truth about Emily's background, about her family, about you is much more complicated than you know, and it's time you knew exactly who she is." Daniel's heart pounded. Emily. Was she connected to this man, to his family in some way? His mind struggled to piece the words together. "Emily?" Daniel whispered, his voice barely audible. What does this have to do with her? Robert's eyes flickered with something akin to guilt. It's not just about Emily. It's about you, Daniel. And your father. Daniel's confusion grew even deeper. My father. What does my father have to do with this? Robert paused, his gaze distant as though he was weighing how much to reveal. Your father wasn't the man you thought he was. He wasn't the man you've always admired. And Emily, well, Emily is more connected to your family than you can possibly imagine. The words hung in the air, suffocating Daniel as he tried to process what Robert was saying. His father, the man who had been his hero, was now being painted in a light Daniel had never even considered, and Emily, the child they had taken in. How was she connected to all of this? Stop, Daniel said, his voice shaking. You need to explain yourself. Now. Robert sighed, his shoulders sagging as though he had carried this burden for too long. I didn't want to be the one to tell you, Daniel, but the truth can't be ignored anymore. Your father wasn't just a businessman. He was involved in things you never knew about. There's a reason your family doesn't talk about him, and it's all tied to Emily. Daniel's head spun. The man he had looked up to, the man who had provided him with everything, was not who he had thought. And now Emily, the child they had welcomed into their lives with open arms, was somehow connected to this tangled web of secrets. Who are you and why are you telling me this? Daniel demanded. His voice was thick with anger and confusion. What's your connection to all this? Robert's eyes flickered with something like regret. But he stood his ground. I knew your father, Daniel, and I knew the woman who's now raising Emily. Your family's past is more twisted than you realize. It's been hidden for years, but the truth will come out. Daniel could barely grasp what he was hearing. His father, his rock, had secrets. The family he had trusted his entire life had been hiding things from him. And now Emily, his daughter, had somehow become the key to unlocking those secrets. This is insane, Daniel muttered, his voice thick with disbelief. You're telling me that Emily, the little girl we took in, has something to do with my father's past? Robert's expression darkened. Yes, and there's more. Emily's not just an orphan, she's part of your bloodline, and you need to know the truth before it's too late. The shock hit Daniel like a sledgehammer. Emily, his daughter, his sister. His mind raced as he tried to make sense of the revelation. Robert's words left him reeling, unable to comprehend the full weight of what had just been revealed. He had thought adopting Emily was the beginning of a new chapter in their family's life, but now it seemed like it was opening up an entirely different, much darker one. Enough, Daniel said, his voice shaky but firm. I don't know what your game is, but you need to leave. I can't deal with this right now. Robert hesitated for a moment, then turned to leave. You'll have to face it eventually, Daniel. The truth always comes out, and when it does, you'll have to make a choice. As the door clicked shut behind Robert, Daniel stood frozen. His mind was whirling, and the weight of the revelation threatened to suffocate him. Emily, his daughter, was connected to a past he didn't even know existed. How could this be? And what did it mean for his family? His life? Daniel turned to face the living room where Emily was playing innocently with her dolls, completely unaware of the storm that was brewing around her. The sound of her laughter was bittersweet. She had no idea how much her life and his was about to change. He had always believed that adopting Emily had been the right decision, that she was the missing piece in their lives. But now the truth was unraveling, and Daniel was left to question everything he thought he knew about his family, his father, and Emily's true identity. The weight of Robert's words hung heavily in the air. He couldn't ignore them. But how could he accept the truth without losing everything he had worked for? His heart pounded as he realized he would soon have to make a choice, one that would define his future and Emily's forever. The bond that unites. The days that followed were filled with uncertainty for Daniel. He couldn't shake the weight of the revelation about Emily's true identity. Every time he looked at her, the confusion, the guilt, and the unspoken truths felt heavier than before. But as the days passed, something remarkable began to happen. Emily, The little girl who had once been a stranger was becoming an irreplaceable part of their family. Her laughter, once a distant sound, now echoed through their home like a song they could no longer live without. She brought joy and light to every room she entered, her innocent charm, disarming even the darkest of thoughts. Daniel couldn't shake. He found himself watching her more closely now. Her way of tilting her head when she was deep in thought, her wide eyes lighting up whenever she learned something new, the way her small hands would play with her dolls, creating elaborate stories. Emily was a gift, one that Daniel couldn't have imagined at the time they decided to adopt her. Yet now, despite the secrets swirling around her past, she felt like his daughter in every sense of the word. And then there was Lucy. Despite everything they had been through, Lucy had stood by him. Her unwavering support was the one thing that kept Daniel anchored. She had asked questions, tried to understand, and even when Daniel had no answers to give, she simply held him. She had become the rock that kept their family together in ways that Daniel couldn't fully express. But even Lucy, as understanding as she was, could see the turmoil within him. "You don't have to carry this burden alone, Daniel," she would say softly at night when they lay in bed. "We're a family now, and Emily needs us, but so do you." Still, Daniel couldn't help but feel torn. How could he reconcile his love for Emily with the secrets that clouded her origins? How could he find peace within himself when his very existence seemed to have been built on lies? One evening after Emily had gone to bed, Daniel and Lucy sat on the couch, the weight of the past few weeks pressing on their shoulders. The silence between them was thick, but it was the kind of silence that allowed for understanding. Daniel finally spoke, his voice low, but filled with the weight of everything he had been feeling. "I'm struggling, Lucy," he admitted, his hands gripping the edge of the couch. "I can't seem to move past the fact that Emily, she's not just my daughter. She's connected to all these lies about my family. How do I love her fully when everything feels so tainted?" Lucy's gaze softened, and she moved closer, taking his hand gently in hers. "Daniel, she's not the lie. She's not the secret. She's the truth we never expected, and maybe that's exactly what we needed. I know you're confused and I know you're hurt, but don't let that stop you from embracing her. She's just a little girl who needs a family, and you're her father." Daniel looked into Lucy's eyes, seeing the strength that had helped her hold everything together. She was right. Emily was the truth. The past was gone, and now all that mattered was the family they were building. But there was still so much Daniel had to confront. The guilt over his father's secrets, the anger that had built up over the years, the fear that their new family might not survive the storm of revelations that had yet to come. Daniel knew that he couldn't ignore the past any longer. He couldn't keep running from the truth. One afternoon, as he sat at his desk, Daniel found himself lost in thought. He had spent so much time focusing on what Emily's true identity meant for him and his family that he had never really thought about what it meant for Emily herself. She had no idea what was happening behind the scenes. All she knew was that she had a home now. But how would she feel when she learned the truth? How would she react when she found out the history that had been hidden from her for so long? The thought made his chest tighten. He had never wanted Emily to feel like a burden. She was his daughter, and he would do anything to protect her from the painful truths of the past, but he couldn't protect her forever. Sooner or later, Emily would need to know. That evening, when Emily came running into the living room with her usual excitement, her innocent laughter filling the room, Daniel found himself at a crossroads. He could either continue hiding from the truth, or he could face it head-on, for Emily, for Lucy, for himself. "Hey, sweetie," Daniel said, smiling as he crouched down to her level. "How was your day?" "It was so fun, Daddy," Emily replied, her eyes sparkling with joy. "I played with my friends, and Miss Sarah gave me a sticker for being good." Daniel chuckled softly, his heart swelling at the sight of her happiness. She was a little girl, so full of life, so full of promise. She deserved the world. And now it was up to him to decide what kind of father he wanted to be for her. "Hey, how about we do something fun tonight?" Daniel suggested, his voice soft. "Like what?" Emily asked eagerly, her excitement palpable. How about we go to the park? You can ride your bike and I'll run after you, Daniel said with a grin. Emily's face lit up. Yay! Can we get ice cream after? She asked, her eyes wide with hope. I think we can manage that. Daniel laughed, ruffling her hair. Let's go get your shoes on. As Emily skipped off toward her room, Daniel stood for a moment watching her go. There was no question in his mind that Emily was his daughter now. No matter what secrets the past held, no matter what truths still needed to be uncovered, Emily was his. And Lucy. Lucy had become everything to him in ways he couldn't explain. They had weathered the storm together, and now they had to face whatever came next. As they walked to the park later that evening, Daniel held Emily's hand, his heart full of love for the little girl who had brought so much joy into their lives. And when they reached the park with the cool evening air brushing against their faces, Daniel felt a sense of peace he hadn't felt in a long time. They had a family now, a family that was built not on secrets, but on love and the willingness to embrace whatever came their way. It wasn't going to be easy. They still had a long road ahead of them. But Daniel knew one thing for sure. He was ready to face the future with Lucy by his side, and with Emily holding his hand ready to walk beside him, no matter what came next. A new beginning. The first day of October began with warm sunlight streaming through the window, waking the family up early. Daniel got up before Lucy and Emily, feeling the calmness inside him, despite the many questions that still weighed on his mind. Though life at home had stabilized, the anxiety about the secrets from the past still lingered. Looking at Emily's innocent face, Daniel couldn't imagine that the little girl he and Lucy had adopted had a connection to his family. The fear of facing such a complicated truth had kept him up many nights, wondering what this would mean for them. Lucy woke up and saw Daniel sitting in contemplation, his expression troubled. She walked over to him, placed a hand on his shoulder, and asked softly, "What's on your mind?" Daniel looked up at her, giving her a weak smile. "I was just thinking about everything we've been through. We've made it this far, but I'm still not sure if we're ready for what comes next." Lucy sat down beside him, her hand gently resting on his back, offering the quiet comfort she always did when things got tough. "I know, Daniel, I'm worried too. But we have Emily and we have each other. We'll make it through this one step at a time." Over the next few weeks, the family found some sense of normalcy. Emily started school, making new friends, and slowly adapting to her new environment. Meanwhile, Daniel and Lucy tried their best to move forward, keeping their focus on their family's well-being. Still, the changes in their lives and the weight of the secrets Daniel had uncovered about his father lingered. In one of their late-night conversations, Lucy spoke her mind. "Daniel, do you think we need a bigger change?" Lucy asked, her voice hesitant. Daniel looked at her a bit surprised. "What do you mean? I think it might be time for us to move. To start over somewhere new," Lucy suggested. "A place where we can build a real life for ourselves without the shadows of the past." Daniel thought about it for a moment. While life was stable now, the past still haunted him, and he knew that to truly rebuild their life, they needed a fresh start, away from all the secrets. "I think you're right," he said slowly. "A fresh start. Do you want us to move?" "Yes." Lucy smiled gently. "A new home, a new neighborhood, a chance to really build something for us, something free from all the secrets." Daniel glanced over at Emily playing in the yard and felt a rush of warmth in his chest. Maybe it was time to let go of everything that had weighed them down and begin anew. "Let's do it," Daniel said, his voice filled with resolve. "We'll find a new place and start fresh for Emily. For us." A few months later, they found a beautiful new home in a quiet area surrounded by greenery. It was a peaceful, welcoming place, everything they needed to truly move forward. In this new home, there were no secrets, just a family looking to build a bright future. They started fresh, not just in terms of a new home, but with their outlook on life, their relationships, and everything they had worked toward. Here there were no secrets, just love and understanding. On a warm evening as the sun began to set, Daniel and Lucy sat together watching Emily play in the garden. The anxiety and uncertainty that had plagued them began to fade. They knew they had made the right decision. "I feel like we've found home," Lucy whispered, her eyes warm. Daniel squeezed her hand and looked at her, his heart at peace. "Yes, this is our family, and this is where we belong." As the night fell, their family gathered together, enjoying their time and building new memories. Emily, whether by blood or not, had become an irreplaceable part of their lives. She was a symbol of hope, of unconditional love, and a bridge between the past and the present. They didn't need perfection. They had each other. The first Christmas in their new home arrived with joy and laughter. The tree was adorned with lights and handmade ornaments, a testament to the new chapter of their lives. The presents they exchanged were thoughtful, but the greatest gift was the love they shared. Their journey had brought them closer together, and together they had found something truly special. They had created a family,